Hello, I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Academy of Urbanism to yet another of our Urbanism Lunch Hour events, this time on the subject of connected cities and future mobility. Our chairman for today will be Andreas Markides. And Andreas recently, he's probably one of those specialists who, through his knowledge, attracts many people to the wider issues of his subject. He gave a talk recently in Limerick that people still talk about. I was saying that he related the issue of transportation, streets and roads, right back to Greek culture and Greek mythology, and people still remember it well. The other thing I'd like to say before we begin is that the Academy, as you know, has moved to a digital platform as a result of the COVID-19 lockdown. And we have many events coming up, which you'll see on our website. We are actually now planning some major events later in the year, an online congress, a landscape and urbanism event, an Latin American urbanism event, among others. But more of that later. I'd now like to introduce my fellow director and colleague, Andreas Markides, to chair the event and introduce the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tony. And welcome everybody to the Academy of Urbanism Lunch. Hello, can you hear me? Yep.
Yes, all good.
Yeah, that's fine. Hello, everybody. As Tony said, my name is Andreas Markides, and I've been a member of the Academy ever since its inception. It's probably one of the best things I've done. As a transport planner, I've had to learn many things from my fellow academicians, including creating better places and better cities. And this is going to be the subject of today's talk. And before I introduce the two speakers, I'd like to say that I used to work for Colin Buchanan and Partners. Sir Colin Buchanan wrote Traffic in Towns in the early 60s and introduced the subject of traffic and how that affects city building. And I will always remember a graph that was contained in his book, which shows the inverse relationship between car accessibility and the environment. The more accessibility we give to the car, the less quality to the environment. And that's something that all of us, transport planners, engineers, and architects are always having to find the correct balance for the environment we want to create. I should say, actually, before I go on to introduce the first speaker, make a few housekeeping points. The first one, I just wanted to let everybody know that this session is being recorded, and I wanted to make all of you aware of that. There's also a chat button that you will all be familiar with. The idea is that there will be a presentation for about 10 minutes from the first speaker, and then we will have questions. During the presentation, can I ask you please to use the chat button to put your questions so that I can then record them, and then we can refer to them at the end of the presentation. So don't be shy, please use the chat button during the speaker's presentation, and that will give us the subject of discussion after each of the two presentations. Finally, can I ask you all please to turn off the cameras and to mute yourselves, just to make the recording much easier. If during the question and answer session you are invited to ask your own question, obviously, please remember to unmute yourselves. Okay, without further ado, I'm now very pleased to introduce our first speaker, who is Kevin Roeton, a town planner in WSP's Future Mobility team. Kevin is currently working with Transport for West Midlands on delivering the first test bed for connected and autonomous vehicles. I don't know about you, but I've always wondered what the difference is between connected and autonomous vehicles. I'm sure that Kevin is going to reveal all in his presentation. So over to you, Kevin.
Thank you, Andreas. A very warm welcome to everyone. Can everyone see my slides?
Not yet.
Not yet, no. Okay. Go back. Okay. I'm going to give a very broad overview of connected and autonomous vehicles to make it as simple as possible. I'm obviously a town planner. I'm not a technical expert, but obviously there's a lot of technical, digital insight into connected autonomous vehicles. So I'm going to give a brief introduction. What are connected and autonomous vehicles? What is a CAV testbed? I'm also going to give a brief introduction on future mobility technologies as well, then put that into an overall background and context in relation to the West Midlands CAV testbed. Then moving forward, I will give a bit of a description of the CAV testbed geography within the Midlands, and then talk a bit about the town planning that we pursued on behalf of Transport for West Midlands. And then got a bit of a sort of thought piece at the end on what is the future role of CAV in urbanism in terms of changing the environment for the better. So first of all, what is future mobility? Well, we're moving into a digital age with transformations in digital technology. So it's basically digitally enabled mobility and transport services. In the context of connected autonomous vehicles, it's important to distinguish, as Andreas said at the beginning, the difference between connected and autonomous. Connected vehicles are vehicles that enable a two-way communication with a wireless system to, for instance, roadside infrastructure. So I've got some examples here of what a connected vehicle will connect with in terms of two-way communications. We've got an example here of an RSU unit, a roadside unit that basically is very much performs a similar role to an antenna, probably the size of your hand, that will transmit data to a vehicle, giving the vehicle information about traffic conditions, weather conditions, whether or not the traffic lights are red, orange, or green. Basic information that will transmit to the car, and the car will transmit information back to the RSU, telling about the situation in terms of the road environment. So also we've got advanced weather stations on masts as well. We've got GNS and GPS all transmitting information to a connected vehicle, and also CCTV cameras that will be monitoring the performance of a connected and autonomous vehicle. So in terms of what an autonomous vehicle is, then that pretty much is a vehicle that can drive on it and by itself. So it's self-autonomous and it's self-driving, which is communicating information between cars as well as roadside infrastructure. And then we move forward into what is a CAV testbed. And a testbed is basically an environment that allows managed interaction between connected and autonomous vehicles situated among live road users. And I think that's an important distinction. Obviously, a lot of testing to date on CAV has been off site. It's now moving forward and testing such technologies on live roads. So the whole concept of future mobility and the whole agenda is very well described in a recent government publication called Future of Mobility Urban Strategy, and it's well worth a read if you get a chance to do so. So why the West Midlands? The West Midlands is recognised by manufacturers around the world as one of the very best places to test and develop CAV technology. It is a research and development hub. The aim, as Andrew Street, the Mayor of the West Midlands Combined Authority, has stated, is to create a cluster effect with manufacturers setting up their operations in order to be close to the facilities and expertise on offer. Obviously, in the Midlands, we've got numerous universities, including Warwick, Coventry and Loughborough, who all have R&D and research into CAV technologies, and also businesses like Jaguar Land Rover and Myra, where there's a research and development testing facility in Nuneaton that tests this type of technology off-site, but it's all about bringing it on live roads and testing it in live situations. So the Midlands has got a proud history in advanced auto industry. I think Coventry was once described as the Motor City. It's obviously, we're moving forward in the post-industrial era, and this whole concept of the Midlands engine as well has got the government support. So there's a mixture of industry, government support, and also expertise in research and development on CAVs. So the West Midlands CAV testbed comprises of a Midlands Future Mobility Consortium, which is a group of organisations and bodies, including the University of Warwick, the Wireless Infrastructure Group, Myra, the testing, Advanced Research and Development Testing Facility in Atherstone, and also Coventry University. So there's a whole plethora of organisations that make up the Midlands Future Mobility Consortium, which has got Innovate UK funding. So turning to the actual CAV testbed in the West Midlands, WSP have been involved in its design, working closely with the main delivery partner, Transport for West Midlands. It starts as a 80-kilometre stretch of existing live roads, which are strategic roads connecting Solihull Loop with Coventry City Centre, and also in a westerly direction towards Birmingham City Centre. So it's 80 kilometres of existing live roads, and as referred to at the beginning of the presentation, it's the type of roadside infrastructure that I've just discussed in terms of masts and RSU units on roadsides that transmit data. Predominantly to begin with, it will be testing connected vehicles, but moving forward, there's the intention for autonomous vehicles to also use live road situations as well. So it's very much sector-led. So the testbed's broken down into a number of sectors. This is a sector that links Solihull with the south of Birmingham Airport along the A45 corridor, and then to the roundabout that connects onto the M42. So yeah, this was an interesting area because we had to do a lot of engagement with Birmingham Airport, and the whole sort of digital era that we're in, there has been some need for testing of the new technology to make sure it doesn't interfere with the Birmingham Airport's anti-drone technology. So there's testing to go underway. I think as we move into a digital era, then it's the sort of interplay with different types of technology and digital infrastructure that is interesting, and we need to make sure that there's obviously no conflicts between the two. So there's the intention to expand the testbed to more sort of semi-urban, rural communities within the Midlands. So it won't just purely be focused on urban environments, but it will become an expansion into probably about 250 kilometres of urban and rural and into urban roads, creating one of the largest CAV lab tests centres within Europe. So turning to the town planning aspects, then we've had to deliver a large number of planning permissions for Transport for West Midlands. It's been a phased delivery. So for phase one, we've secured 18 planning permissions across 34 sites, which includes 5 linear sectors. For phase 2, we've secured 13 planning permissions for 19 sites across a further 3 linear sectors. So there's been a batched approach. I think the key to delivery has been good, close engagement with the local planning authorities, both Solihull, Metropolitan Borough Council, Coventry City Council and Birmingham City Council. Obviously, it's a new technology and we've had to engage very early on to discuss and explain how it will perform. I think local government is key, obviously, to its delivery. So they've been important partners in terms of getting the infrastructure passed through the town planning process. In terms of the stage we're at the moment, in terms of delivery, we've secured planning permission for phase 1 and 2. The actual phase 1 is being installed at this current moment in time. So we're looking to be able to switch on phase 1 of the testbed at the start of July this year. So it will all go live very soon on the roads across the West Midlands. So to conclude, there's a lot of obviously interesting discussions of how connected and autonomous vehicles can change the urban environment and environments as a whole. So if we are taking off vehicles from the roads and we've got these autonomous vehicles that allow interaction and better interaction between pedestrians and other users, and taking the traditional car off the roads, what sort of better environments can we create? There's a link there to an interesting piece of research that WSP have done on how cabs can change the urban environment. And I think we can put this in the context of a post-COVID-19 world as well. Obviously, at the current moment in time, I know the whole cab technology has been advanced as a result of COVID-19. I think there's quite a few examples in Wuhan, China, where lockdown has been a lot more stricter, where they've actually used autonomous vehicles to transport food supplies and medical supplies to hospitals without human interaction. So as we move forward into this new world, I think connected and autonomous vehicles does pose quite interesting questions on how can we maximise and utilise this technology to better the environment that we live in. And it also has significant implications on things like freight, logistics, how we move people and goods across regions and borders more generally. There's also recent examples of government support with a number of announcements on future mobility or future transport zones extending beyond West Midlands, which includes the cities of Nottingham and Derby, and then also Southampton and the South West Combined Authority. So it's very much, this is a whole new agenda that's being delivered at the moment. And as I said, the cab technology testbed is a bit of trial and experimentation. And the intention is that once the vehicles get tested from either the likes of JLR or foreign investment from China, then it's hoped that this will act as a catalyst for future developments. And it's very much an evolving process. And then obviously it's how we can deliver a cab testbed that then moves forward and connects with strategic development and regional growth as a whole, so we can enhance development from a wide perspective. So I think that's a very broad overview of connected and autonomous vehicles. I'll hand it back to you, Andreas.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. I'm going to use the chair's prerogative to ask the first question, which is what we would all like to know, Kevin, is when are we going to see this technology actually implemented? Because what you've been talking about now is a test bed, isn't it? Just along a particular route in the West Midlands, which will then grow into a network. when is the testing going to finish and the reality going to start? That's what we would all like to know.
Okay. The Connected Autonomous Vehicle Testbed will last for 8 years, so it's temporary in nature. It will begin, as I said, at the beginning of July, the rollout of phase 1. So it's been all the roadside infrastructure being installed at this current moment in time. So it will all go live with connected vehicles being tested on live roads within the West Midlands from 1st of July. As I said, autonomous vehicles, it won't be at this current moment in time because the advancements in that technology is still evolving. However, it is intended that the CAV testbed will eventually allow autonomous vehicles to be tested on live roads as well. So it's very much an evolving process. And it's testing connected vehicles to begin with, then moving forward, hopefully onto autonomous vehicles.
Okay, so if the testing will take 8 years, you know, it's reasonable to assume that, you know, we are not going to enter into this new era for at least another 10 years.
Well, it's all about creating a live testbed lab for private investment and potentially public investment to test out new CAV technologies within a live road environment. So it depends on how quickly innovation will develop. So as I think we've discussed before about mobile phone technology and computers, etc., how quickly advanced they could potentially become. And the whole testbed is about creating this ecosystem, this environment for testing such technologies. So hopefully by getting this testbed in place, it will sort of catalyze and mobilize a lot more advancements in technologies at a lot quicker pace.
Okay, we are beginning to get lots of questions now, one of which brings us back really to the purpose of the Academy and, you know, our keen interest in promoting better placemaking, etc. So how do you think this technology will affect the future cities?
I think it will have a profound effect. I think digital infrastructure as a whole will change cities, hopefully for the better. Obviously, there'll be new challenges as a result. I think there's been some news recently about cybersecurity and the need for obviously CAV technologies to be secure from a digital perspective. So there's going to still be challenges, but I think the overall aims will be to improve the urban environment. So improve safety, improve sort of performance of vehicles, so there's less emissions being emitted. And also, as a result of this sort of reduction in the sort of so-called traditional petrol vehicle, then the environment should improve to the extent where we can obviously widen streets, sort of close off streets for sort of traditional vehicles, and which will allow much more safer and friendlier connected and autonomous vehicles to interact with cyclists and pedestrians to the extent that obviously we can improve the public realm, so it's a lot less sort of congested from a sort of safety perspective.
Okay, can I bring in some of the questionnaires now? Stephen, I don't know if you are able to unmute Stephen B, who has a question about human interaction.
Yes, thank you. Well, my question was that Kevin's explained what the project is and what autonomous and connected vehicles are, but I'm still struggling with what problem they are seeking to overcome and what improvements they're likely to make. Kevin's recently just referred to safety, performance and pollution, but I'm assuming that all vehicles in the future will be electric anyway, which will reduce pollution in the immediate urban environment. And performance, I can see that there's a value in perhaps service vehicles, public transport and delivery vehicles being connected to their operating, central operating systems. But I'm still struggling to see why autonomous vehicles should be better than allowing people to drive their own vehicles, and I don't see why people driving vehicles should be any less safe than autonomous vehicles if the appropriate traffic management systems are in place. There's plenty of examples.
Good question, Stephen. So, Kevin, over to you.
No, good points. I mean, I probably haven't emphasised the sort of whole concept of obviously working within a without having to drive the vehicle yourself. So there's other opportunities to do certain stuff within autonomous vehicles moving forward, like work, completely new and ways of travel. So those sort of things will come ahead. But yeah, it is very much evolving process. So the whole connected vehicle concept, some of it is not new, it's just evolving, and the benefits won't come until later on along the lines. Now, in terms of the improvements to the urban environment, it's really taking vehicles off the road, the traditional type of vehicles that you see, and then you introduce things like robotics and delivery bots as well that can transform how goods and people are delivered to certain areas of the city or rural environments. So it's still an area that's being developed and explored. So it's more, I would say, a technical question that's probably better to be answered by others than myself.
Okay.
I think
that's
I'm a town
fine.
planner. So.
Yep. Can I bring in Cathal O'Boyle, who has a couple of questions actually? Cathal, are you there? From Cork?
Andreas, I don't think she has access to a microphone.
Ah, okay. In that case, I will ask her questions myself. How long is the testbed expected to run? I think you've answered that, which was, you said it will take about 8 years in total, isn't it?
Correct, yeah.
And what are the planning permissions for? You talked about securing planning permissions. Is that for the infrastructure? Yeah,
it's interesting that, and I haven't elaborated on it yet. Some of the infrastructure, we've been able to argue that it's de minimis. So obviously different local authorities come with different views on permitted development, but we've managed to argue some of the apparatus on their own is actually de minimis. They're very small antennas, therefore we dismissed it as being permitted development. However, the problem we've experienced is that Transport for West Midlands haven't got sort of statutory powers or statutory undertaker powers like many others that deliver this type of infrastructure, like Highways England, for instance. So we have had to go through the route of getting planning permission. So we've had to get planning permission for the roadside cabinets, the new masts with the apparatus on, like the RSU units, the CCTV cameras, and the high-tech weather station monitoring equipment. So there's been a large number of applications that we've submitted. We've done them on an individual basis and dealt with them on an individual basis as well. So it hasn't been a strategic submission, it's been an individual site-based submission. Okay,
thank you. Can I bring in Stephanos Smith? Stephanos Smith, who has quite a long question, but some of the points that he raises have been covered by others so far. But can we unmute, please, Stephanos Smith? No? Okay. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you like to ask your question, please? Yep. Please fire away.
Yes, thanks very much, Andreas, and thank you, Kevin, for a very informative, thought-provoking presentation. My question picks up on some of the earlier questions. That artist impression that you had on your slide didn't generate particular, from my perspective, a great place to kind of move or operate in. There seemed to be a lot of conflict and chaos between the pedestrians, cyclists, CAV, etc. It seemed very chaotic. And my question is, what was the Academy did we have the opportunity to participate in the consultation process around place and the impact of CAV on place? I think some other questionnaire has raised the issue of possible segregation between uses. And one principle might be the separation of CAV, creating CAV corridors, and then a more appropriate pedestrian human scale type of environment in another location.
Yeah,
yeah, Kevin.
Sorry, that's a good point. I mean, the separation between CAV technologies and the environment and other users is still to be confirmed. So there may well need to be barriers in place to stop CAV vehicles sort of interacting with pedestrians. It's obviously subject to testing and further experimentation. So yeah, it's probably maybe I'll be a bit misleading in terms of actually what the actual future environment could look at, but it just posed the question of how will CAV change the urban environment for the better or worse. So yeah, you're correct. There is still going to be a need for further testing, and there may need to be separation between CAV and pedestrians and cyclists as a whole. So how that will transform the urban environment is an interesting thought.
Okay, Kevin, there are loads more questions, but we need to move on soon. I'm going to bring in one last questionnaire, which is Esier Abaunza from Bilbao City Council. So if Esier would like to ask.
Hello, morning.
Hi.
Hello. I think that it's very interesting, the discussion about the new technologies and connected and autonomous vehicles. But I think that for urban planners and when we are talking about the public space inside the cities, the most important point is to remove the private car from the streets. Because one point is the security of the driving cars, and of course, the pollution that the traditional cars produce in the cities. But I think most important is that the public space in the built streets is reduced. In most of the European cities, the streets are very narrow. And so it doesn't care if the car is driven by people or automatically managed. The problem is that we don't have a space for all the users of the street. So I think that it could be an interesting technology for metropolitan areas, but probably not so much for urban streets. I think it's more important the increase of the public transport system, or to enhance the walking paths and the cycling ways inside the city more than the autonomous car. How do you see this point? I mean, isn't it more important to increase the use of the public transport more than the autonomous vehicle?
Okay, I'll give you the opportunity to respond to that, Kevin, because and then move on to the next speaker, because your question is actually very relevant to the next presentation. So, Kevin, do you have anything to say to that before we move on?
No, it's an interesting point. I mean, it all enters into this debate about CAV and urbanism as a whole. How do we adapt the urban street environment for CAVs, or do we adapt CAVs to the street environment, and then to what extent does CAV be used in a form of public transport or not? There's loads of questions there that will, that need to be debated and brought to the fore and discussed. And yeah, hopefully this presentation and the questions people have asked will mean that type of discussions will be had going forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Kevin. Fascinating. As you can see, your presentation raised many questions. There's probably some skepticism about, your technology, but I'm sure you will prove all of us wrong in the future. I'm going to move on to the next presentation. As I said at the beginning, the Academy is interested in creating better places and city making. And one way that we might attempt to do that is through technology, as Kevin has illustrated. there is another way, and that's the way that our next speaker will speak about. Brian Love, who is an architect and a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. He is also a director of Love Architecture and the CEO of Connected Cities. I won't steal Brian's thunder. Connected Cities is a fantastic, bold initiative, and Brian will tell us all about that now. Over to you, Brian.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you very much for the previous presentation, which I think we'll see that all these elements integrate together. We're beginning from the point of view of greenhouse gas emissions and the planet as a whole. We think of ourselves as a group that's encouraging positive development throughout the entire planet. And we're well aware if we're going to get to stick to our 2-degree rise in temperature, then we will have to bring down our emissions dramatically. And you can see on the right how fast they're going up. Of the emissions, the largest sector is transport. And this is despite the fact that individual vehicles are becoming much more energy efficient. The problem is that until 3 weeks ago, or whatever it was, the transport sector was increasing in size at a very rapid rate. And the Department of Transport just predicted as a norm that growth could be up to 51% by 2050, and that congestion itself would increase by up to 16%. And this is just on a normal growth pattern they're predicting. So we're looking at the most efficient way of moving people around if they want to move. And as you can see on this graphic, which was produced by the American Transportation Association, private vehicles are the least efficient, and the 2 most efficient are walking and tramways, buses, rail, that kind. So Connected Cities focuses all its energies on encouraging development, which enables from the outset public transport, walking, and this particularly uses existing rail corridors because it takes a long time to put infrastructure in place, so it's good to start with what we've got. However, the ideas are not new. This is Ebenezer Howard's Social City, an image that I suspect most people in the Academy will be familiar, where he talked about a cluster of towns coming together. These are all connected by electric railways. And so Connected Cities takes this idea that you do not expand your city ever greater at the edges, but you preserve green space between the settlements, and applies it to the existing railway system. And that's what we call a connected city. So a connected city is a cluster of towns which are already linked by a railway network, and within them, we focus development on the so-called PED sheds, the 1 kilometre circles around the railway stations. In this diagram, the black circles represent existing stations, the green circles represent potential new stations. And this group of towns functions together as a connected city, and it plans the growth and expansion of the area as a group. It's a voluntary process, it's not enforced, but it offers individually great advantages. There's always a hub town, and the maximum extent of a connected city is 15 minutes travel time from that hub town. And within these PED sheds, the focus is public realm, walking, cycling, active travel, safety. And so a series of principles about how PED sheds should work. First of all, walking and cycling infrastructure is at its focus. The red line here represents the railway. The station is at the centre. Obviously, one has to preserve everything that is worth preserving. And so the first analysis of any development within these is to conserve what is important. The second is to ensure that there's blue and green infrastructure there. So the intention is that there should always be, as far as possible, green and blue brought right to the core of the PED shed. Public transportation and vehicle routes avoid the centre of the PED shed in the area immediately around the railway station, which is, that centre is the core where you have retail, educational, that kind of centre. Around that is a mixed use zone, which is pedestrian priority. Those service vehicles will be allowed into it, obviously, for disposing of refuse and things of that kind. The employment uses act as a buffer. They're either side of the railway, because inevitably there's always going to be a railway line running through the middle of this. And the housing is, or family housing anyway, is in a series of villages which are around the core, but which are all connected to the resources and the access that the core provides. But in addition, we accept the fact, obviously, there has to be community facilities, dentists, churches, things of that kind, local shopping, and they will be on the main vehicle route around the headshed. So if you put all these elements together, you end up with a diagram that looks as like the one on the screen we have here. And these ped sheds accommodate approximately 30,000 people. Now, that happens to be almost exactly the size and the capacity of Howard's Garden City. So it offers a way forward for providing a way of dealing with the enormous growth which is actually predicted for the UK population. The Office of National Statistics median growth is that by 2051 there'll be 80 million of us, and by 2081 90 million. The high growth factors are significantly above this. So we have a lot of people that have to go somewhere in the future. We already have a shortage of housing. By 2050, that could be 18 million people who need to be housed. By 2080, 21 million people. This is in addition to the population we already have. And to put this in context, if you're to house 21 million people in 30,000 population new green towns or new garden cities, you require 700 of them, which on the face of it seems like an impossible demand of the country. However, it is well within the capacity of what can be shown. So this is an example of a real connected city. It's based, in fact, on Stevenage and Hitchin, and indeed Letchworth is in the top right-hand corner. And the growth that's predicted here is that there should be growth within the towns, but only in the 1 kilometre around the railway station. That's the gold circles. And the green circles represent new railway stations with new growth around them. And so there's no growth at the edges of the towns. Everything is accessible by transport. Everything encourages active travel. So a simple example of how this works. Here we have what we call a town growth zone. It's around the existing station in Hitchin. Hitchin already has a town centre. It's about 500 yards from the railway station. What we propose is that that should be linked by a mixed-use space and a pedestrian priority zone, which will link into what will become the growth area around the railway station, which right now has actually quite a lot of land around it, which isn't very intensively used. The next opportunity is to have new stations still connected to the town, but at the point where the railway leaves the existing town. So this then gives you an area of presently undeveloped, to which you apply all of the Pedshare principles. But it also makes the town better serviced for public transport because the town now has an additional railway station. The third option is to have a completely new standing settlement, which isn't connected to any existing settlements, except by the railway. And here is an example of one that would be on a Greenfield site, as it were. So applying all of this to, for example, the Oxford Milton Keynes corridor, you get a series of connected cities linked by, in this case, existing railway stations, apart from the fact that when we did it, we assumed that the East-West Railway would actually be in place, and that's the dotted red line. But what we discovered when doing the analysis is that you can double the population of the Oxford, Milton Keynes arc simply within 1 kilometre of railway stations where there are existing and new. Once again, in this, the yellow circles represent existing stations, the green, potential new ones. Within Southeast England, there is a potential for approximately 100 connected cities. These could accommodate 10 million people, and this is in Southeast England alone. And they will only actually take 3% of the Southeast's undeveloped land, because all of the development will be within these 1 kilometre radius ped sheds. There's a lot more information about this available on our website, which is connectedcities.co.uk. There is a free book available from the website, which you can download, or you can purchase a hard copy. But if you're searching for this via Google, we would ask you to type in connected cities as all one word, in which case we turn up near the top of the searches. If you type in connected cities as 2 words, we end up on about page 12. But as I say, all this information is free. We are in the present running a series of online seminars about metroization of the railways, because metroization is a phrase that came within the railway industry. They're looking to use new technology to run much more frequent services on the existing railways. And so we are running a series of case study online seminars between now and October, looking at existing proposals for developing around rail stations and existing proposals for opening new lines and increasing frequency on existing lines. All of those are free. At the end of it, we will be having in October a real physical conference, assuming that circumstances permit, at which the chairman of Network Rail, Sir Peter Hendy, will be the keynote speaker. That everybody is also invited. So at this point, I will stop the share and over to you, Andreas.
So, an altogether different approach to future city making based on high density development and public transport, what other people might call land use planning, which is my kind of thing as well. So Brian, very inspiring and very bold initiative. I just wanted to kind of put you to the test, if you like, and ask, how are you doing with it? And are you gathering momentum? Are people following? And are you making headways?
Yes, I mean, the answer is I'm actually amazed by the progress we've been making, because the idea was launched at a parliamentary debate at the Houses of Parliament at the end of 2018. And since then, we have been attracting interest from a much wider range of people than I ever anticipated. And obviously, we are being asked to speak at various events. But in addition, we've got to the point now where we're beginning the process of directly lobbying government. And so fortunately, the new ministers are very much in tune with this kind of thinking. Grant Shapps has said that he is committed to the idea of developing public transport, even in the current circumstances. And so we feel that we're definitely knocking on an open door.
Good. Thank you. Lots of questions for you. I'm going to start with Kevin, laptop 2. Kevin, would you like to ask your question, please?
Yes, thanks very much for the presentation. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
My question is coming from experience of this. It's obviously lots of people on the call hearing you will be familiar with the ped shed side, but on the transport side, there is a tension between loading up the corridor, the rail corridor, with new settlements garden villages, plant towns, whatever they may be, when there is also demand for longer, faster intercity or interurban trips. And sometimes it becomes quite hard to plan those for transport reasons rather than maybe land use reasons when the land is available. So I just wanted to ask about that, and also where there is more scope generally to either reopen stations that have closed down post-beaching, or indeed reopen lines closed down post-beaching, to follow up your basic thrust of the thesis that's about building network capacity and the intensity along those routes. So there's kind of two parts. One is the frequency of trains, and the other is the networks and the reopening post-beaching.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I mean, they are pertinent questions, and the replies to them will be in much deeper, greater detail in two forthcoming seminars we're running. So next Wednesday at 3:30 in the afternoon, we have a seminar about the proposals for the Devon Metro. And two of the speakers there will be from GWR and from Network Rail for Southwest Region. They are talking about exactly the problems you described, as a conflict between the need for long distance national services using similar technology and tracks to the local services. There are two elements by which they're improving capacity. The first is they're using existing signalling in a much more intense way. So they're shortening headways, they're making the blocks much smaller, and this is just using the existing technology they got, and that's a fairly straightforward process. So that's number one. Number two is that Network Rail is in the process of rolling out something which is initially installed on Thameslink, which is an entirely new kind of signalling. It's called ETCS, European Train something system. It's part of the ERTMS, which is the European Train Management System. Essentially what these do, they're new digital systems, and they take the signalling off what they call sticks at the side of the line, and they put all the information into the individual cabs of the trains. And it enables the trains to run much, much closer together, and therefore you can get very high frequencies. Through the central section of Thameslink, which it took them a long time to build, but which they learned a vast amount about, they now can run trains at 2-minute headways, no problem at all. So that really is a metro service. It's as good as any underground anywhere. And they, having learnt painfully, but very successfully on the Thameslink program, they are now in the process of rolling out this technology across the entire network. So as time rolls on, this new technology will naturally come in and automatically solve most of those problems.
Okay.
As regards the opening of other stations and lines, the seminar that we're holding in June on Wednesday the 27th is about the reopening of the Northumberland line in northeast England, which will be happening, everybody seems to be assuming, in the next year or two, because that's been well advanced. The Minister has approved it, Network Rail have accepted it, and so we are getting all of the key players there together to hold a seminar on a Wednesday afternoon. As I say, I think it's the 20th.
Thank you, Brian. I'm just going to hurry along a bit because there's lots more questions. Can I go to Roger Smith now? I don't know if you Roger, is it a question or a point you're making?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yep.
So I think it's a point more than a question, in that certainly I've had dealings with both Network Rail and GWR in relation to a proposal for a new railway station, and it's been hugely frustrating. This proposal involves a new station on a main line, and the principal concern of Network Rail and GWR has been the impact on existing fast services. And my experience is that unless there is huge investment, whether it's additional tracks or new signals, as being suggested, actually, it's going to be very difficult to persuade Network Rail to actually agree to any significant number of new railway stations. So thank you.
Thank you.
Could I come back on that one?
Yes, please, Brian.
Yeah. Yes, you're absolutely right. And everybody in the development industry I know who talks about Network Rail says, my God, stay away from them. However, Network Rail have woken up to this. They have actually done two things. The first is that they are now organized by regions, and the regional directors have responsibility for their lines. And they have instigated an entirely new class of person within Network Rail called the Industry Program Director. And the Industry Program Director reports directly to the regional head, and their job is to work with and integrate with the communities that they serve. Because within Network Rail, there's been a very big shift to putting passengers, people first. And this is, so they're deliberately working hard to try to, one, bring in additional cash from outside, and two, to tame the so-called ASPRO group, which is the Asset Protection Organization within Network Rail, that insists on saying, no, you can't do that because. So Network Rail is very aware of the fact that the demands upon them are changing, and that they are doing their best to change to accommodate them.
Okay. Brian, there are quite a few more questions, but we're coming close to the end. So I'm just going to ask, I'm just going to ask the two of the questions myself, which are kind of looking at your hypothesis in a slightly different way. The first point is from Claire, who talks about a less linear pattern of development, which will put less emphasis on rail travel and more on mixed-use centers to be accessed by bicycle. So that's Claire's point. And then Rob Tranmer is also saying that your approach would require significant public sector intervention, and how can we achieve this? Would you like to very quickly respond to those 2 points?
Okay, well, in the first instance, we're 100% in favour of bicycles and mixed use and getting that to happen. It's just that we'd like to ensure that it isn't somewhere in the middle of nowhere that will encourage people to use cars to get there. So we'd like it to occur in places where there's going to be good public transport. The second, Connected Cities proposes that there should be a Connected Cities Act, a new Cities Act, which gives local authorities who choose to come together to form a connected city a series of powers, including the powers to create development corporations, to take more control over their local transport, and many other powers of this kind, which would tap into funding that would be appropriate to deliver this. Because yes, you're absolutely right. This is something that has to be led voluntarily by a group of towns seeking to determine where is the best location for their growth to occur, because we're all going to have to accommodate this growth somehow, somewhere, and this offers an opportunity for local societies to do in the way that works best for them.
Fantastic. I'm going to, there are more questions, but I'm afraid I'm going to call this to a close now. Thank you very much, Brian, and please carry on your good work, and I wish you good luck with the Connected Cities initiative. At this point, can I ask, please, Olga, to just tell everybody about some of our future activities of the Academy?
Hello.
Yeah.
So let me start sharing. Okay, so our first event that is coming up next week, it's the awards shortlisting on Wednesday, 20th of May at 2. So the nominations for the awards this year are about to close this afternoon at 5. I know it's hard to choose. We have 210 great places. But please nominate if you haven't done it yet, and we will have the award shortlisting to select our 15 finalists next week on Wednesday. And then given the current circumstances, we'll have to come back to finalize these 15 places if they will be able to join the awards this year, which is going to be done at the 30th of June. And our next Urbanism Lunch Hour is next week on Friday, same time at 1. It's a focus on housing for older people in multi-generation neighborhoods. The speaker is Liz Longard and Ian Spiron, and they will try to give and start a discussion about how innovation can bring life in years for older people in multi-generational neighborhoods. We have our coffee mornings now that they are in Scotland for 2 months now. We have it every Tuesday at 11 o'clock. So if you want to join the Scotland coffee mornings, please get in touch with Rachel at AOU Scotland at academy.org.uk. And we have more activities coming up for the next couple of months. So please visit the Academy website to see what events you would like to attend, or if you want to learn more about how you can join the Academy. So this is it.
Thank you, Olga. Yeah,
thank
and
you.
can I thank our two speakers again? It's been a fantastic and very scintillating 1 hour. I hope everybody's enjoyed it. Thank you also to Olga and Stephen for organizing the event. I certainly would not have managed the technology without them. And can I also thank everybody who's taken part? We couldn't do it without you. And that's the way the Academy works, through joint discussion and learning from each other. I hope you've enjoyed the session, and can I wish you a good afternoon and a good and safe weekend. Thank you.